Hello everyone and welcome to this screencast on nonverbal communication. This is potentially my favorite topic in the entire universe of all communication. I think it is so fun and I enjoy how diverse it is. Now, as a communication instructor, I am, of course, expected to love all of communication, and I do. But nonverbal communication truthfully takes the cake for me because, as your textbook will help describe for you, this is the majority of meaning that is created. Now, if you remember all the way back from chapter 1 in the lecture about how meaning is co created, that means, again, that I send out a message to you with my intent, and then you or whoever else listens to me ascribes to that content, that message, whatever they think it means, and together we kind of come up with a jumbled up mess, which is what we think we said, which is also where a lot of confusion comes into communication because, of course, we misinterpret things quite often. Now, the way that we clarify things would be through nonverbal communication. And nonverbal communication is basically anything that is not words. It can be your voice, it can be your body language, your hand gestures, your movement, your shoulders, your eyebrows, whatever it could be. But it's anything that is not verbal, non-words. So do keep that definition in mind because a lot of people think that nonverbal is everything body and nothing voice. It does include your voice, but it's a specific type of vocal communication, and we'll get into that later. Now, nonverbal communication makes up a lot of the meaning that we create, and some textbooks have said that it makes up to 93% of all meaning. So 93% of what you intend to communicate comes from nonverbals. So, question time. How many of you have ever sent a text message or received a text message that got misinterpreted? How did it get misinterpreted? How badly did you misinterpret it? Did autocorrect do you in? The same thing kind of happens with emailing. Words are beautiful and they are how we primarily communicate, but if you take away all the nonverbals, you're taking away quite a lot of communication because you want to hear the inflection in someone's voice if they're doing okay. You want to see if they arch that eyebrow whenever they were sending you something to indicate sarcasm. So nonverbal communication is really important. And what's going to happen is that in this screencast, I'm going to talk about some of the different forms of nonverbal. Your textbook does discuss a few extra, but these are the top main ones. And then I'm going to introduce you to the project that you will be doing with nonverbal communication that kind of ends up being my students' normal favorite project because you get to play with nonverbal communication and take what is normal and make it abnormal to make it just a little bit more interesting. Now, to start it off, we'll talk about the first form of nonverbal communication, which is oculesics. And oculesics is eye communication. So ocular, like binocular or monocle or something like that. It is ocular communication. Now, take a step back and think for just a moment. How do you use your eyes to communicate? How often and how long do you make eye contact with someone else? For example, let's say that we were in a standard lecture thing. You were in a classroom, I was the teacher, I'm up here lecturing, and let's say that I lock eyes with you and you only, and I don't look away. How many seconds would it take before you felt a little bit uncomfortable? Would you feel uncomfortable at all, or would you see it as a challenge and bring it on? What would you do? We kind of diversify when it comes to how we respond to eye communication. I love eye communication, but it also can be extremely threatening. If you want to win an argument, lock eyes with someone and smile at them. If you do that, they will eventually get a little bit freaked out and they will eventually stop arguing because it's very uncomfortable. They will normally have a typical rise in aggression because they're trying to scare you, and then they'll eventually deflate because you're kind of weirding them out with all that lovely eye communication. Now, we do use eye communication to signify a lot of different things. It could be interest, it could be disinterest. If you've ever had a fight with someone where you have been in the wrong, what do you normally do with eye contact? I remember as a teenager, anytime I had a fight with my parents, if I was caught, oh boy, I wasn't making eye contact with anybody. And that's a typical thing whenever we do not want to connect. It's also a sign of aggression amongst animals, especially dogs. And if you have a dog and you've ever yelled at it and it kind of looks away for a while, they're using oculesics too. Oculesics is fun, it's useful. If you want to do well in a job interview, a really good thing to do is make beautifully strong eye contact with your interviewer. I actually once got a job in my teenagehood from eye contact solely. It was a group interview, and the interviewer said I was the only person that made eye contact with him throughout the entire interview, and he figured that would be a good thing. The job I was interviewing for was in sales, and so eye communication is very important there. So don't stare someone down if it's an inappropriate situation. If you are not a fan of eye contact, my advice is for you to get a little bit more confident with that and more comfortable with that, because it is something that you are going to have to use. Next up, we have haptics. This is the study of touch. So this is whenever someone's body comes in contact with another person's body. Now, haptic communication is kind of easy to think about. You know, when do you come into contact with someone? Do you give them a hug? Is it the pat on the back? Is it the handshake? Do you fist bump, high five? What is it that you do to come into physical contact with someone else? Some people, like my husband, are germaphobes, so physical contact is not their thing, but you can convince them into it if you promise you've used a lot of hand sanitizer or something. Haptics is also very useful because we use this a lot to show what our voices can't show. For example, you could be going down all the aisles of the mall, it's you and your friend, you see somebody interesting, you give them the elbow nudge. You kind of say, hey, look at me, use your Oculus extender haptics, bump, look. Works out pretty well. Haptics is extremely helpful because we use this to emote. If someone is having a bad day, it's the arm around the shoulders and the pat on the back. If you're greeting someone, firm, strong handshake. If you haven't seen somebody in a while, you might have a big hug, you might do the jump up and chest bump, whatever it might be. We use it to communicate all sorts of levels of friendship. It is a good thing to use, and it can be used incorrectly, and we'll get into that later. Next, we have vocalics, which is also known as paralanguage. So do not be thrown off if a test question in your near future asks you what the definition of paralanguage is. It is the same as vocalics, but alternating communication textbooks do have diverse definitions of what that is. So vocalics, paralanguage, same thing. As you might have guessed, this is the nonverbal communication category that involves your voice. This is the type that most people try to forget about. It is still part of nonverbals because how you use your voice changes how your words bring meaning. Think about the word O, O-H. How many different ways can you say that? Oh. 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 That is vocalics, using your voice to bring different definition to words. This is where a lot of good friends have a lot of fun because you can change your voice and see if your friend understands what's going on. My best friend and I have known each other for over 20 years, and if she calls me, she can say, oh, I'm doing fine. But I can hear that inflection where, no, we're not doing fine and we need to go have a chat now. So same thing with you. Vocalics are fun. They are useful, and you need to practice them because a lot of people have a monotone voice and they do not display emotion well. So if you're using vocalics and this is your same response to everything, people are probably going to think that you're not interested, not listening, not doing as much as you could. Other people have super happy, wonderful, animated voices, and they're just bouncing off the walls, and it's an amazing amount of energy. I don't know how they do it. I'm kind of in the middle there. But vocalics is something that you do need to really pay attention to in presentations. How many of you have had lectures or been in classrooms where the professor speaks in a monotone, a slow-paced monotone where the information is the same like this the entire time for an hour and a half? How many of us survived that lecture? Not too many. While you are designing your presentations, you do need to push vocalics. Even if you are not a sunshiny, type of person with your voice, you need to have authority and animation in your voice because that is what communicates passion and interest to people. I could be talking to you about the most fascinating thing in the world, but if I have this delivery that's just not interested, no oculesics, and I'm not really interested and my vocalics are detached, then I'm not going to bring anybody in. But if I'm in here and I'm going, guys, this is so cool. See how you can use this. This is how you do that. Then it brings people in, even if it's not really their world. I'm pretty sure if you took a second to pause this video and thought about it, you probably could think of a family member or a pastor or a teacher or a radio personality or a celebrity or a TV host who just their vocals, the way they use their voice is just amazing. One of my favorite comedians is Jim Gaffigan, and his humor, quite frankly, is all in the nonverbals. What he says is funny, but how he delivers it is what brings the punch, which is what brings the laughter, which is what gets us and oh. So this is what Vocalix does. This has to do with your pitch, how high or how low your voice is, your pace, how fast or how slow. It has to do with volume changes. It has to do with pauses and silences. It's all in your delivery. So this is something that you have to practice. This is why whenever you deliver a presentation, you should practice it at home and you should practice it with Vocalix. If you practice your presentation reading with an outline in front of your face, guess what your presentation is going to be? And this is the most informational thing I've ever done, and that's turn page, cool. Not really going to bring in a lot of people. So push your Vocalix. Again, even if it is not your natural personality, become that personality for your presentation. You can go back and be the most quiet person ever after your speech. To move on, we have kinesics. Kinesics is all about kinesthetics, so it's about body movement and gestures. This also includes facial expressions. So for your future project in this class, if you decide to do something with your face, that does come under the kinesic category. Kinesics is probably the most diverse category of nonverbal communication because I believe there are over 28,000 potential facial expressions that we can create. And a former textbook of mine joked that Jim Carrey could do them all. Well, I'll go with that. We do have a lot of facial expressions, but I'm not going to go into those so much. But think about, these are your eyebrow tweaks, your frowns, your concern, furrowing of the brow, your smiles, your sad faces, whatever it might be. You know how to do that, no problems. But kinesics, again, involves everything else. This is your body movement and your gestures. So this could be waving at people. This could be signaling someone for help. This could be, goofing around, pretending you're going to get a fight. It could be in dancing. It could be Zumba. Whatever it is your movement. How does your movement impact your communication? Well, think. How do you move whenever you communicate? If you're having a really good time with your friends, typically we get more animated. The gestures get up, the eyebrows go up, whatever it is. We start getting in there and we're just in that fun, entertainment, woo, whatever it might be. And if we're at home curled up with a book, there's not a lot of kinesic activity. So kinesics comes into energy again and animation. So you do have to push that personality with kinesics. This comes into communicating as a presenter by pushing how you move in front of your audience. Again, you have to speak with authority. And the best way you can do that is to use your body and your hands effectively. Do not just stand still. Standing still causes knees to lock and fainting to occur. So you need to make sure that you move. In day-to-day communication, again, this could be how we greet people, how we farewell them, how we show how animated we are in a communication circumstance. Females are generally more kinesic than males. Males will most likely have the crossed arms, and that's an enjoyable conversation, or they put the hands in the pockets, and that's what they do. And females tend to be closer and more animated with their body language. Again, these are generalizations, not rules. Next, we have proxemics, which to me is probably the most entertaining category of nonverbal. Proxemics has to do with proximity. This has to do with the spatial distance between you and others. And when I say spatial, I don't mean spatial as in outer space, I mean spatial as in distance. So that's S-P-A-T-I-A-L. And there are 4 different proxemic zones, and I will want you to explore those in your textbook. For the sake of keeping this video shorter, I do not want to go over those here. But please give yourself a note that says 4 zones of proxemic space and go and look in your textbook for those, please. But proxemics, again, has to do with space between you and another person's body. Obviously, proxemics does change with your connection with another person. If you really trust someone or you are in a familial or romantic relationship, you probably will have not so much space. If you do not know someone and you most certainly do not trust them, then they are probably going to be a little bit further away. The thing to note with proxemics is that this is your personal bubble, but your bubble does change based off of where you are and the circumstances you're in. For example, if you're walking across campus and somebody runs up and slams into you, you're probably going to be upset because it's like, why did you have to run into me? There's only the whole rest of campus for you to go on. However, if you're at a heavy metal concert in the middle of a mosh pit, if someone smacks into you, that's kind of expected and normal, and you really shouldn't throw a fit about it. So again, bubbles change. Question for you, what's your bubble? Do you have a big bubble, meaning you don't like it when people are any closer than like 10 feet? Or do you have almost no bubble at all? People can be right in your face and you don't care. This does change based off of who you are and what your experiences are. As a teacher, I don't have a bubble anymore because people have no problem whatsoever bursting my bubble. They're popping into my space all the time. Check this, ask question 1 on this. So I don't worry about it anymore. I also used to be a babysitter. So again, kids, no bubbles. So you don't worry about it. However, other people have big bubbles, and if you get in their space, they will physically start backing away from you because it's just not comfortable for them. Everyone does have their own bubble. You do need to know what your limits are and see the strengths and weaknesses of those bubbles. Again, job interviews, huge. If you are uncomfortable being close to people, job interviews are probably going to be stressful. If you are really comfortable being in other people's space, you might freak out the person that's interviewing you. So you do need to kind of judge the gaps there. The last category I want to go over for the sake of this is artifactual communication. And this has to do with any item that we put on ourselves to represent who we are. That's a little bit of an ambiguous definition, so I want to make that a little bit better. Think of something like this. This is my cell phone. You could probably look here and see what type of phone it is, how old it is, what's it made out of, do I have a protective case, and you'd be able to tell a lot about me. What I have is a Droid Turbo, the first one. By the time you watch this, there's probably going to be like 8 other ones out there, so I'm not advertising for anybody here. But it's a type of phone that has a very, very long battery life. So what should that tell you about me? Either I'm really busy and don't have time to stop and charge my phone, or I don't like having to stop, or I use my phone a lot and need it to have a wide battery capacity. It also has a Kevlar back and a shatterproof screen, which should probably tell you that I drop it a lot. So don't have a protective case, but do want to protect the phone. So that tells you something about who I am. If I held up my car keys, you would probably be able to tell, what type of house key I have. If I have any, like a Kroger card or a Food City card or a Vitamin Shop card, you'd be able to see what type of car I drive, whether it's a Honda or a Subaru or a Nissan or something like that. You would be able to see the approximate age. If I have any little dangly doodads on my keychain, the little fun little things that we have on there. If you look closely in the video, you can see whether I have piercings or not, how I cover those or do not cover those, the fact that I'm wearing my hair like this, the fact that I have this makeup. All of these things change and do communicate who I am and how I work as a person. Now, this is potentially the most interesting category of nonverbal communication, to me at least, because again, I know I've said this about everyone. This one's most fun, this one's most entertaining, this one's most personable, but artifactual is powerful because this is how you communicate who you are. If you dye your hair, that shows me something about you. If you shower regularly, please do, that shows me something about you. If you wear comfy clothes, that tells me something. If you wear name brand, that tells me something. If you have a $600 purse, that tells me something. If you have a Nissan GTR, that tells me something. All of these things tell me about who you are. I mean, that's one of the reasons I hear people get tattoos all the time. This is how I express myself. That is who I am. So that tells me something. Those are artifacts. Artifacts are historical items that represent a culture or a community. Artifactual communication is basically the same thing. How do you represent yourself by the items and things that you use? And again, this could be something as simple as, do you style your hair? Do you wear it short? Are you clean cut? Do you have a beard? Do you like V-necks? Do you like turtlenecks? Whatever it is. Again, think of things such as wedding rings. You can tell here whether or not I'm married. It's all there, and there's so much if you just pay attention to it. I love, love, love watching people. I've been a people watcher ever since I was like 3. I love seeing people and reading about them. The one thing you do want to keep in mind, though, is that we can very easily be inaccurate with our observations. So don't read into someone's nonverbals and then think that you have them completely pegged, because you might not. Do have a little bit of modesty in how you evaluate people. Now, to move on, this slide breaks down what your project is going to be, or at least what the paper of it is going to be. Your syllabus has more information, but there's also an audio file or 2 that are provided to give you even more information on it, but I will go over a little bit here. Your project is basically to take one of these forms of nonverbal communication, and you are going to design an experiment. You are going to implement that experiment on multiple participants, and then you are going to write a 3 to 5 page paper on what your responses are. Now, that paper is going to be very clearly structured. This is something I do need you to pay attention to, because this is where people forget and they lose points. You are going to have an introduction here. Your introduction is going to be standard. That means it follows the same rules as your speech introduction. So attention grabber, thesis, preview, credibility, relevance. All those points need to be there. Your first main point is experiment. This is where you tell me what you're going to do. Where are you going to go? What form are you studying? What are you going to do with that form of nonverbal communication? Who are you going to do it to? And then most importantly, you are going to have a prediction for me. You are going to tell me what you think is going to happen. Now, this is very key. You do need to tell me what you think people are going to do. Once you do this experiment, how do you think they're going to respond? You do need to make sure you include that. Don't forget it. Doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. All researchers and all scientists are wrong often. I'm not going to take off points if you predict one thing and this other thing happens. I'm not worried about that. You're then going to tell me your results. What did you see? This should be simple, about a paragraph. This is what happened. My advice, please group your results. If you do this to 10 people, please do not write to me about 10 individual responses. Person 1 did. Person 2 did. Person 3 did. By person 3, you're bored, I'm bored, we're all bored, don't do it. So what you need to do is group them. So think of it as positive results, negative results, neutral results, outlier results. Because you'll normally have that one crazy person who gives you the completely different reaction from everybody else. Sometimes you won't, but normally you will. But just group them. You can decide what your groups are. It could be interesting, not interesting, or it could be response versus no response. But do group them, please. Do not go person by person. In your discussion section, this is potentially the lengthiest part of your paper. It should be at least 2 or 3 paragraphs long. This is when you kind of answer the question, why? Why do you think you received the reactions that you did? Go through that, analyze it group by group, not person by person. You can bring up specific examples from a person, but again, don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. After you have explained why you think you have gotten the reactions that you have, then address your prediction and tell me whether you were correct or incorrect, and explain why you think that happened. If you were correct, tell me why. If you were wrong, no problem. Why were you wrong? Then you're going to go into your conclusion, your beautiful conclusion, which would be standard. Again, this means signal in conclusion. And then you will go over your thesis, your review of main points, adding a detail from each, and then some type of clincher. Now, to break down this a little bit more specifically, introduction, 1 paragraph. Experiment, 1, maybe 2 paragraphs. Results section, 1 paragraph. Discussion, 2 to 3 paragraphs. Conclusion, 1. Now, format. 3 to 5 pages, double spaced. Don't single space this. You will stress yourself to death trying to get it to 3 pages long. Headings. These words, introduction, experiment, results, discussion, and conclusion should be headings. This means they are words by themselves. Flush left on the page. Flush left means it touches the margin. It doesn't go all the way to the edge, but it's just on that 1-inch margin. and they are in bold and italicized. There is an example on D2L for you to look at so that you can break down how it's done. So if you're not seeing what I'm talking about, that's fine. You can go to D2L and there is a nonverbal paper example there for you. Examples of potential projects you can do. Let's say that I decided to do a proxemic study. I mentioned previously that there are 4 zones of proxemics. What I could do is go from the outermost zone to the innermost zone and see how close I can get to somebody before they are uncomfortable. So I could start from 20 feet away, follow them to 15 feet away, 10 feet away, 5 feet away, and see how close I can get to their body before they react to me. I've also had students do what I call the park bench study. They went to a park, they found someone sitting on a bench, they sat on the other side of the bench, and then as time went on, they started scooting closer to the other person until the other person either reacted, left, freaked out, or whatever. One of my students was sitting on a man's lap before the man responded. Kind of entertaining. I've had oculesic studies where students decided not to make eye contact with their parents for an entire day. In one notable example, one of my students had her parents calling the doctor to make an appointment for her to see if she was pregnant, because the only reason she could not be making eye contact was because she had done something wrong, and that's immediately where their minds went. I've also had people who did haptic studies. They walk around campus and they just offer up high fives. They try to see how many people will high five a stranger. Artifactual studies. I've had people who have dressed differently and gone into different locations. I had one person who went to a furniture store locally, and they went one day, clean cut, clean shaven, suit, tie, and everything, and walked in. They could not get the salespeople to leave them alone, just followed throughout the entire store. They went back the next week and they dressed, unshaven, dirty, hadn't showered, torn t-shirt, cargo shorts, flip-flops, that type of thing. And no one even greeted them at the store. Same staff, same store, same everything, but the artifacts changed it all. For vocalic studies, I have had people who have sung to others. Instead of speaking, they sang to everything they said to see how the other person would react. I've had people change their pitch. They would talk in an uncommonly high voice or uncommonly low voice, or they'd change their pace. Kinesic study, I've had students dance around and try to see how many people they can get to dance with them. So it really is entirely up to you what you want to do. Just choose one form, design one experiment, and then implement it and get your results. The caveat here is that you do have to email me ahead of time to get your topic approved, because I don't want anyone to do anything stupid. If you want to get in an elevator and sit underneath the buttons and see if people will reach over you to hit a floor, you can do that, but I don't really advise that you try to take someone's child out of a stroller. So be careful, be cautious, be intelligent with what you choose to do, but do what you want, but you have to let me approve it first. If I do not approve your topic, I will not grade your project. I have to have approval of everything that you touch with this one, since it does involve human participants. You are welcome to do this to family and friends. You are welcome to do this to strangers. You do need to do something a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but not way out there. And I do want you to do this experiment to people who will react to you. Because if you do this to your family, they might just kind of go, oh. Or they could completely overreact. It's just dependent on you and your family. I do not know your situation, so I cannot dictate to you what you should do. However, I do want you to think about it, and I do want you to email me, and if you're completely stumped, email me and we'll figure out something together. If you have any questions, please review your syllabus. Please check out the audio files that are also provided for you, and then contact me if there is absolutely anything that I can do. So thank you so much. I appreciate you listening, and if I can do anything for you, as always, get in touch.